6.8 earthquake struck Myanmar on Wednesday night, causing tremors in countries throughout the region. And the earthquake hit some 400 kilometers northwest of Myanmar's capital, Naypyidaw, around 8 p.m. local time. And employees at 2 Chinese enterprises near the earthquake's epicenter say they felt strong tremors, but no one was hurt. And the Chinese company's buildings and dormitories remain intact. People in Tibet in southwest China also felt the earthquake. In Bangladesh, stampedes triggered by the earthquake injured scores of people, and officials in northeastern India have shut down thermal power stations as a precautionary measure. In the nation's capital, New Delhi, people evacuated high-rise buildings to gather in safety out on the street.
I was working inside my office when the earthquake struck. Everybody inside ran out of the building. These frequent earthquakes can prove to be very dangerous.
Overnight, rescuers pulled an 8-month-old baby from the rubble of Japan's devastating earthquake. An emergency worker cradled the infant, who was apparently unharmed. The 6.5 magnitude quake yesterday killed at least 9 people and injured more than 850 others. The epicenter is on the island of Kyushu. That's about 550 miles southwest of Tokyo. Lucy Craft is in Tokyo tracking the rescue efforts there. Lucy, good morning.
Good morning. Today we're starting to get a sense of just how destructive this earthquake really was. Japanese self-defense forces have started delivering food, water, and blankets to evacuation points. Meanwhile, thousands are in need of shelter following the strongest earthquake to hit Japan since 2011.
You can see the panic on the faces of these workers at a TV station in Kumamoto the moment the earthquake struck. The violent shaking sending them stumbling across their newsroom as they searched for protection from the falling debris. The deadly magnitude 6.5 quake hit the Japanese island of Kyushu just before 9:30 p.m. Thursday night. There have been more than 100 aftershocks, some almost as strong as the initial quake. Those tremors are slowing down rescue efforts, but teams were able to save this 8-month-old baby from a collapsed home. It took 6 hours to reach the baby, who has reportedly been reunited with her parents. However, it is unclear how many more people could still be trapped under debris. Hundreds have been forced from homes that are either destroyed or too unstable to stay in. As many as 44,000 people were seeking shelter. The island of Kyushu is home to the only Japanese nuclear power plant still in operation. Most of Japan's nuclear reactors were shut down in 2011 following a massive 9.0 magnitude earthquake that triggered a tsunami and the meltdown of the Fukushima plant. So far, officials have reported no problems to the nuclear facility in Kyushu.
No tsunami risk has resulted from Thursday night's earthquake. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is trying to prevent any secondary disasters from aftershocks. Japan's meteorological agency says additional tremors could last for another week.
the size of baseballs caused widespread damage in Texas, shattering windshields and windows in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. The powerful hail even pierced a hole through the roof of this home.
It's just incredible, you know. I've never been through anything like this before.
Not even police cars could escape the fury of what Mother Nature unleashed. The hail broke through countless car windows, and in the city of Wiley, just outside Dallas, schools have been canceled because of all the damage.
I just, looking at the damage, just kind of going, where do I begin? You know, so shrug. That's more glass falling.
Other parts of the South were also hit with severe weather. In Arkansas, violent storms knocked down trees, crushing cars and homes.
When I heard the boom, I ducked, and then I looked up and there was a tree in my house.
Lightning sparked a fire that destroyed this church in El Dorado.
Now grappling with an intense heat wave, with some areas reporting soaring temperatures of over 40 degrees Celsius. Since last week, the eastern state of Odisha, as well as the southern states of Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, have recorded a total of 130 deaths due to sunstrokes induced by the heat wave. And the country's Weather Bureau said the extreme temperature is caused by the El Nino phenomenon, delaying the usual April rainfalls. However, the Bureau said India will experience above normal rainfalls later this year.
Has caused severe flooding in 12 provinces, leaving several people dead. The floods have washed away cars and blocked roads. Iranian Railway Authority has cancelled all trains scheduled for Friday to and from the southern parts of the country. Iran's Red Crescent says 126 cities have been affected by the floods. In Khuzestan, nearly 2,100 people have been evacuated to safer areas, that is. Several people have been injured in the southern province, while some 300 homes are underwater in Lorestan. Iran's President Hassan Rouhani has ordered authorities to mobilize all resources available to provide relief assistance to the flood-stricken people.
Malawi's children are waiting, not for school, nor playtime, nor for fun, but simply for food. Behind them, the best hope they have at getting it is withering away. A combination of floods and dry spells have ravaged crops, and nearly 3 million people are either going hungry or surviving on food aid. But in a few weeks' time, that will stop unless funding is secured. And without aid, Steria must boil pumpkin leaves to feed her family.
Me and my husband, we can survive without eating, but not the children. Children have died in this community. My children wake up and look at me and think I'm going to get food, but I can't. I don't have anywhere to go. I'm so worried about them.
Down the road, Louisa's family often sit in silence. They are down to one meal a day. But 6 weeks ago, her daughter and her niece were so hungry that they ate poisonous raw cassava. Both of them died.
After more than 2 years of civil war, the people in Padang in eastern South Sudan face the threat of both violence and famine. They've now been left with little option, surviving mostly on wild berries and leaves.
We survive from the tree leaves, but eating them is causing a lot of problems. People and children are having diarrhea, leaves are not good, and children are suffering from malnutrition. Besides, we don't have medication in our health center.
At this MSF clinic, the results of malnutrition are clear. The United Nations is warning that tens of thousands are at risk of starvation in South Sudan's conflict zones. 2.8 million more are in need of emergency food aid. More than 2 million people have now been forced to flee their homes.
very few cases left. Just 2 countries at this point with polio, Pakistan and Afghanistan, and with any luck, either this year or next year, we'll have the last cases of those. You know, our foundation is designed to continue to give money for 20 years after the last of Melinda and I to be alive. And so, you know, we expect to be giving money for quite a long time.
Health alert about the Zika virus. Top government health officials sounding the alarm this morning, saying the virus is, quote, scarier than they thought and could spread through more of the U.S. than previously believed. They initially thought 12 states were at risk, but now that number growing to 30 and fears it could rise as the temperature heats up. Here's what officials had to say.
Everything we look at with this virus seems to be a bit scarier than we initially thought.
The more and more we learn, the more and more you get concerned about the scope of what this virus is doing.
Long lines for vaccination in São Paulo. The result of a new virus outbreak and new fears. This time it's the H1N1 virus, also known as swine flu. Across the country, it's killed 102 people since the beginning of the year, most of them in São Paulo. With so much attention of late focused on the Zika epidemic, this H1N1 outbreak, beginning during the southern hemisphere summer, caught many people off guard. Health authorities ramped up the yearly vaccine campaign to try to deal with the outbreak ahead of winter.
Mothers are desperate because we have a runny nose and already think the worst. So we have to bring the kids for vaccination. It's a disease with heavy symptoms that can leave lasting side effects. We have to come. It's a no-brainer.
Of yellow fever is posing a threat in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's according to the World Health Organization. The virus has killed 21 people in the country so far. The WHO links some cases to an outbreak in neighboring Angola, where the acute mosquito-borne viral disease has killed 225 people and infected about 1,600. In a statement, the WHO said the deaths had occurred in January to March, with 151 suspected cases recorded. People traveling to Angola will now be vaccinated against the disease.
The Dogs Trust encourages and actively promotes neutering and microchipping to all dog owners. Microchipping itself is a permanent identification for dogs, and it is a very effective way of reuniting dogs back with the right owners if they do get lost or go missing.
The Bible makes the list as one of the most objected books in public libraries and schools, right along with things like 50 Shades of Grey. People feel that it violates the separation between church and state. Joining us now, Father Jonathan Morris. Father Morris, listen, I know there's a big atheist movement in this country, and I understand where people are coming from with respect to church and state, but this one is mind-boggling. I don't get it.
Well, first of all, we should be so happy we live in a country where people can object to what's in our libraries. You know, that's the most important thing. I'm very happy that atheists can go and say, we don't want the Bible. But then we need people with common sense to say, one thing is for you not to want it. Another thing is for there to be intellectual openness and tolerance for all. And I say that not just for the Bible, but for other books as well. And that's what we're losing in this country if we don't stand up and say, enough is enough. Yes, you can have your point of view, but you can't tell other people what they're allowed to read.
Hague's International Airport Schiphol has been partially evacuated following a security alert. Officials say one person was taken into custody in connection with a suspicious package found at a commercial section of the airport. Security officers, as well as a bomb squad team, were seen rushing to the site and cordoning off the terminal and the adjacent Sheraton Hotel. The alert caused havoc among passengers at the often crowded Amsterdam airport. Much of Europe remains on high alert following last month's deadly terror attacks in Belgium. Like the November attacks in Paris, the Brussels bombings were claimed by the Daesh terrorist group. Meanwhile, EU member states are facing criticism for their failure to share security intelligence and make a concerted effort to deal with the threat of terrorism.
U.S. Marines at their breaking point, being asked to do more with less. Long wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, the fight against ISIS, budget cuts, all taking a toll on the U.S. Marine Corps, forcing fighter jets and helicopters to break down, losing valuable hours in the air to train, and according to the Marines and military analysts, putting our nation at risk. National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin traveled down to 2 Marine Corps air stations to receive an exclusive first-hand look at how America's military appears to be breaking.
This is when the landing gear door came off, this is the hole that it made in the intake on its way down to the engine.
Marine Major Mike Malone is a maintenance officer for a squadron of F-18 Hornets preparing to deploy into combat overseas. This particular jet bombed Muammar Gaddafi's compound in Libya in 1986, 30 years ago today. It's still flying. Recently, when the Marines needed a part for this plane, they tried to cannibalize the hinge from a museum jet on display on the USS Yorktown.
It's very, very old to be flying for an aircraft. These aircraft were designed to fly for 6,000 hours.
The Marines are extending them to fly 8,000. Budget cuts that reduced the force to 30,000 fewer Marines and wars that were supposed to end but didn't are making it harder to patch these old planes together.
Imagine taking like a 1995 Cadillac and trying to make it a Ferrari. You're trying to make it faster, more efficient, but it's still an old airframe, so the aircraft is constantly breaking.
The Marines that we don't have enough of them to do the added work.
Sometimes it takes the Marines 18 months to get parts for these early model F-18 jets whose production was halted in 2001. This F-18 has to deploy again in July.
Colonel, where are the wings to this plane?
Yeah, that's a good question. They're on other jets.
Colonel Harry Thomas, call sign Crash, deployed to the Pacific with 10 jets last year. Only 7 made it.
Dangerous close encounter with Russian jets raising echoes of the Cold War. This dramatic video shows them repeatedly flying near a U.S. warship in the Baltic Sea. ABC's chief global affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz has the latest, joins us from our Washington bureau. Good morning, Martha.
Good morning, Robin. This morning, the Russians are saying they observed all safety precautions when flying by that U.S. warship, but there was nothing safe about this. The Russians have not come this close to U.S. ships in decades.
It's not just a dangerously close flyby, one within 30 feet of the U.S. destroyer. It is one of the most aggressive Russian acts against the U.S. military since the end of the Cold War.
Below the bridge.
Russian jets flying in a way that simulated an attack, and not just once, but over and over. In the last 2 days, the jets making more than 30 passes over the American ship in international waters and roaring at just 100 feet off the Baltic Sea, causing a wake in the water as if a giant speedboat had raced by.
It's wholly unsafe. There's no reason to be that low. There's no room for error, and there's lots of room for disaster.
And it wasn't just the attack jets. The Russians had a helicopter flying low-altitude circles around the U.S. warship more than half a dozen times. The Americans on the destroyer repeatedly radioed the Russian pilots of the helicopter and the jets in both English and Russian, but the transmissions were ignored.
Could they be entering a new chapter of looking to intimidate NATO in the northern Baltics? Or is this something where they're looking to distract NATO as they may begin a spring offensive in the Ukraine?
This morning, the U.S. continues to work diplomatic channels about the incident, but over the last few years, the Russians have only gotten more aggressive with these flybys, and nothing the U.S. has done so far, George, has stopped that.
Elsewhere, Russia has accused the U.S. of seeking to build up its military presence in the Korean Peninsula by deploying missile systems to the region.
Russia and China are no less concerned about the desire of individual states to use a difficult situation on the Korean Peninsula to build up their military presence in the region in order to load into it new weapons, including the most recent weapons which are so advanced that it's completely disproportionate to the real threat which comes from the situation on the Korean Peninsula.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov made the remarks during a meeting with Mongolian, Japanese, and Chinese journalists in Moscow. He also echoed Russia and China's concerns over the possible U.S. missile deployments, warning that this could jeopardize the security of both nations. Lavrov described U.S. deployments as, quote, a violation of strategic stability.
Says that more than 3 decades of the arms embargoes may have created difficulties for the country's defense sector, but it has also provided Iran with an opportunity to develop homegrown weapons. Here in Tehran, a series of weapons and armored vehicles that were either built or modified by Iranian experts were delivered to the Army ground forces less than a week to the National Army Day. During the ceremony, commander of the Iranian Army's ground forces, Brigadier General Ahmad Reza Purdastan, said that today the distance between idea and the final product is shorter than ever.
Today, we are able to design and manufacture many of our operational requirements in the shortest possible time, and this accelerating progress has enabled us to have dominance on our borders while boosting our strength against possible threats.
The arms include sniper rifles equipped with the latest night vision cameras, super heavy tank carriers, self-propelled howitzer cannons, and air defense units, armored personnel carriers, and this high-tech insulated armored vehicle. The Shahram armored vehicle is one of the unveiled products which, according to the Iranian army, has been completely designed and built by Iranian experts. This mobile laboratory is capable of testing the amount of radioactive, chemical and biological warfare material in contaminated areas. The Iranian army already has an 8-year combat experience from the 1980 to 1988 Iraq-Iran war. After the 1979 Islamic Revolution, Iran was faced with an arms embargo from the U.S. and its allies. That was when the first ideas of self-reliance and defense began to emerge in the country.
Second day of military drills by Iran's Islamic Revolution Guards Corps is underway in the southeast of the country. IRGC Ground Force has conducted security offensive drills near the border with Pakistan. The second day of the massive war games started in Mir Javeh region in Sistan and Balochistan province in the presence of IRGC Ground Force Commander Brigadier General Mohammad Pakpour. The general says such offensive destruction operations were carried out for the first time during the drills. The security exercises will continue until Thursday. The IRGC staged major ballistic missile exercises last month. The drills were aimed at testing advanced missile defense systems, as well as showcasing the power of the IRGC in defending the country's territorial integrity against possible threats.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow on Thursday to discuss regional security issues. The topics under discussion will include Syria, where Russian troops have been supporting the regime of embattled President Bashar Assad, and the ongoing Israeli conflict with the Palestinians. Israel has also lobbied for Moscow to nix the sale of advanced S-300 air defense systems to Iran, and that issue may be on the agenda as well. Israeli officials said in March that Netanyahu would spend April 21st in the Russian capital, with the situation in Syria at the top of the agenda. Friday is the start of the Jewish holiday of Passover, when Netanyahu will likely aim to be back in the country.
Jews visiting the Temple Mount during Passover could stoke violence, senior Palestinian leaders warned on Wednesday. Al-Aqsa is a red line. People will not think twice about protecting it. said the head of Fatah's armed Tanzim wing in Jerusalem. Jerusalem Mufti Sheikh Mohammed Ahmad Hussein, the Muslim cleric in charge of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, also warned against increased Jewish provocations at the compound during the Jewish festival, which begins next Friday evening. We must stop religious groups and extremist Jews from invading this Muslim holy site, he said.
The UN Security Council is a very important subject because it has now become urgent due to settlement activities and because Israel has not stopped these activities, which is something that has seriously jeopardized the two-state project and caused it to collapse. Over the past 8 years, we have been expecting the U.S. administration to take positive steps toward the achievement of what America believes in, which is a two-state vision. But until now, this has not happened.
Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders exchanged blows over the Middle East in Thursday night's heated debate in New York, only a few days before voters go to the polls there. Clinton accused the Palestinians of rejectionism and backed the Jewish state's right to defend itself against Palestinian attacks. If Yasser Arafat had agreed with my husband at Camp David in the late 1990s to the offer that Prime Minister Barak put on the table, we would have had a Palestinian state for 15 years already, Clinton said. Sanders maintained that being 100% pro-Israel does not mean forgetting there are two sides to the conflict. There comes a time, if we are going to pursue justice and peace, that we are going to have to say that Netanyahu is not right all the time, Sanders said. Clinton highlighted her involvement with Middle East peace efforts as President Obama's top diplomat and accused Sanders of failing to provide a solution to the conflict. Describing the problem is a lot easier than trying to solve it, Clinton said.